Welcome to the 19th Century Charitable Association of Oak Park. Our vision is to be a dynamic cultural center for community learning. Good afternoon. I'm Peggy McGrath. I'm a member of the Science Committee. We have 29 programs scheduled for this season. They include art, literature, science, music, and social studies. Strengthen our community through learning, giving, and sharing of our landmark building. Today's program is How to Save the Planet and Save Money Too. I'm truly thrilled to introduce Pam Tate. For years, she was CEO of the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning. She has held numerous influential roles in that field and holds a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania in Communications, and also masters in both English and journalism from the University of Illinois, Champaign. After receiving a scholarship in 2019 and trained in climate issues by the former Vice President Al Gore, Pam is a climate reality project leader and chairs the committee which oversees all teams and campaigns, giving talks all over the country. We are so lucky to have her here today, and also so lucky that she's a resident of Oak Park. And a small little tidbit is she's very fond of giraffes and is very concerned about their extinction. So please give a warm welcome to Pam Tate.
Thank you, Peggy. Thanks very much. And I am very concerned about the plight of giraffes, and that could be another talk. It is a pleasure to be here, and especially to share with you my passion about the climate crisis and what we can do about it. So I'm really glad to be here today, and I want to share with you that before we jump into the agenda, I want to make sure you know that there is a YouTube video that is being created. And if you feel that this is going very fast, there's a lot of data, you might not be able to get it all, you don't need to worry, because 19th Century Charitable 4315 is the YouTube channel on which you can get the entire presentation. So I am going to try to go as quickly as I can and leave time for questions, and I hope there are comments as well. So today we're going to try to understand the impact of the climate crisis, not just the weather, which is what all of us give a lot of attention to, or the fires in California, but to a number of other impacts that we are seeing around the world. But then a major part of what I want to talk about is what we can do about it, not only individually, but at the state level, and even with the current federal picture, which is rather grim, we still can do a lot to address the crisis. And I like to start my presentations with this picture, because it really fascinated me. It's a picture of the surface of the Earth, and it's taken from the space shuttle, sorry. And what it shows you is the bottom two levels of the atmosphere, that blue ribbon that you see. That blue ribbon looks to us like the sky. No, it looks like it's limitless, but it's really very, very narrow. If you were to take a car and drive straight up, you would be at the end of our atmosphere in less than 10 minutes. So it's very, very narrow. And the sad thing is that every single day, we are dumping 110 million tons of global warming pollution that we are causing. Think about that. Every single day, we are doing that. And here is where the greenhouse gases are coming from. And I won't go into this whole pie chart, again, no time today, but the big ones are our transportation system, both cars and heavy-duty vehicles, our energy generation, and our industries. There are other polluting pieces of the pie, but these are the main ones. But by far, the biggest cause is fossil fuels, their production, their distribution, and their use. So this, as a result, this is what's happened to our global temperatures. If you have the feeling that things have really changed, they have. You can see where the red is going. You can see that each year is just about every year is the hottest year on record. And I want you to know, and I added this note for myself, in Chicago, just to give you a local picture, the temperatures have already risen 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit just since 1980. The average temperatures here. And why is that? We have an increased heat island effect in our city because of all the cement and the number of people here and the amount of industry here. But apart from that, we're still 2.5 degrees warmer on average than we were just in 1980, in my lifetime. Now, the good news and the not so good news is that 93% of this extra heat that's being trapped in our atmosphere from fossil fuel pollution, it's trapped in the ocean. If it weren't for that, the planet would be uninhabitable right now. But the sad thing about it is that this has caused the oceans to heat up. That's why you're hearing about all the damage of our coral reefs and other marine animals having so much difficulty. And half of this increase in the heat content of the oceans, at the same time as we're heating up everything else, half of this increase has occurred just since the 20 years ago. So look at that blue line of the surface temperature of the ocean. Well, the oceans cannot get a whole lot warmer without things really getting out of balance. They already are, but they will get worse. So, of course, we all pay attention to extreme weather. That's what we all talk about, right? Oh, the weather's not like it used to be. And a lot of people will say to me, well, you know, if there's really global warming, then how can we get this cold spell like this? How can we get single-digit temperatures? Global warming does not mean that everything is warmer all the time. What it means is that everything is more extreme. It means the heat is hotter, the cold that comes down from the Arctic is colder. It means things are much more unsteady and volatile. That's why we have more intense hurricanes. That's why we have more flooding. That's why our droughts are more severe in the parts of the country that have them. And that is why our wildfires are so much more destructive. Because the extremes are what is happening with global warming. Think about it that way, the extremes. The cause of it all, or a lot of it, has to do with the hydrological cycle. And I just bring this up even though it's kind of a wonky term, but it is that the more heat is in the ocean, the more this evaporates from the ocean, the more precipitation it causes in the atmosphere. Then we have these downpours, and then the water floods in many cases and returns to the sea. And that cycle, as many scientists have said, is spinning out of balance. And it's all the result of human activity that we have caused this kind of climate change. This is agreed upon by almost 100% of scientists around the world, regardless of what our national administration currently is saying. Think about just in your lifetimes, globally, floods and extreme rainfall is occurring 4 times more often than happened in 1980. 4 times more often. And there have been 22 1-in-1,000-year downpour events just in the last 12 years. And so what you see is going to get worse, I'm sorry to say. This is just one picture I thought captured it all. This is a supercell storm with a column of rain at the center. This is taken in Montana. And there's one more that really knocked me out, and this one is from Phoenix. This is This is just another example of what's called a rain bomb that are happening frequently around the country. And of course, the soil or desert or whatever can't absorb this, and that's why the flooding is more severe. I did want to show you Chicago. This, you may remember the 21, when we had that extreme downfall. You see what's spewing out of the sewers? That's sewage, because there was so much rain that the sewage system of our city couldn't handle it. And so this raw sewage is just spewing into the air in downtown Chicago. And many of us here had our basements flooded. Maybe you did. But that's how it comes home, to us here. What is not talked about as much is what it does to migration. And at a time when we're having so many battles about immigration, one of the things that I want to point out is that more than 20 million people around the world were displaced not by cartels or other things, but by extreme weather just in 2023. And in some countries, it's because of extreme rain and the inability to grow crops and flooding. In others, it's extreme drought, depending on where you live. People cannot live in these places, so naturally they want to move, and they are on the move. And that causes the kind of political instability that we have all been seeing. So moving away from weather, which is probably the thing that we're most familiar with, there are many effects on the food system. When I was trained by Al Gore, he spent about 20, 25, 30 minutes on every one of these little bubbles, how the food system was being affected. So I just want to show you two things. One, the yields of our crops are diminishing. And these four, corn, wheat, rice, and soy, they make up 2/3 of our calories. And the yield declines every time you have 1 more degree centigrade of warming are these. This is serious because so many people across the world depend on these 4 crops for their survival. So when the yields go down, then human health suffers. Then the second thing I want to show you is it's not just the yields that are a problem, it's the nutritional levels that are a problem. And I've spent a lot of time on this issue myself about what happens to soil health when it gets hotter and drier. Rising concentration of carbon dioxide threatens global nutrition because what it does is it reduces the nutritional level in food. One statistic I remember reading just recently is that for our generation, we have to eat 8 oranges to get the same nutritional content as our grandparents did when they ate 1. And that has to do with rising levels of carbon dioxide in our soil. And I could give you many other examples. Now, there's also how it affects human health. And we spent a great deal of time during our training on each of these aspects of how climate change affects our health. And I can't do it all, but I can share with you a couple of things. One of the ways that it really is a serious problem with our health is that as we expand further and further into wild places, or what we would call wilderness, 5 new infectious diseases are emerging every single year on average because we're going into places we've never been because the human population is growing. I just picked this picture because I thought it really demonstrated it. This one happens to be from China, but this is occurring everywhere. It's much easier for insects and diseases to grow in warmer climate. And that is because it's disrupting natural ecosystems. What that does is it makes life beautiful for infectious diseases. They like the warmer weather. They like the longer growing seasons. Just a picture of some of the tropical diseases that have now begun to move north because of climate change. The Zika virus that we never used to hear about, the West Nile virus, you can see how far north the green dot is. We are seeing many, well, why is that? Well, you know, they have longer to incubate, they have longer growth cycle, warmer. It just works better for infectious diseases. And so we should not be surprised that diseases like COVID and others arise in these times. And I'm afraid we will see more of them. I can't finish the impact part of this, because it's depressing, of course, but I can't finish the impact part without talking about the biodiversity crisis that is also happening. And that probably is what brought me to this issue in the first place. My concern about animals, birds, insects, fish, all marine mammals. This is an extinction crisis that is happening now and is likely to worsen. This is one of the things that really struck me that I had to share with you, that 40 to 60% of the fish species in our world are at risk by the end of the century. And that's because the oceans, the rivers, the lakes, the waters will just be too warm for them to spawn and too warm for their embryos. So we risk losing all these fish species. And we risk losing up to 50% of all land-based species in this century. That happens to be the golden poison frog. I just picked him out because he's kind of good looking. And so that tells us that we are going to see a serious sixth extinction. We are in the middle of it now. The Field Museum has a little digital readout that you can visit when you go through the Earth, the nature and Earth section, and at the end it says, how many species have gone extinct since 8 o'clock this morning? And on the day I was there, about 2 in the afternoon, it was 22 had gone extinct in just that day. And I don't know about you, but that really, really upset me, and it is continuing. So this is kind of a summary of the cost of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. We've talked about some of them briefly, but water scarcity, loss of ecosystems, the loss of our infrastructure, all the damage that is being done to everything we've built, the climate refugees. Essentially, our way of life is being threatened by climate change. And while we may not feel it every day, I bet you if you look back on the past 20 years or 30 years, you feel it. You know it. It is happening to us. In fact, the World Economic Forum now says that 7 of the 10 biggest risks to the world economy are related to climate change. Only 3, weapons of mass destruction, cyber attacks, and the breakdown of information networks, only those 3 are not affected as much or caused by climate change. So this is not just a risk to our way of life, it's a risk to our economic way of life. And hopefully that would get some attention on it from policymakers. That's what we would hope. So, with that as the backdrop, and I'm sad that that's the context, but it is, I think we now need to talk about what can we do. And we do have solutions. We do have them. They are there. There are things we can do as individuals, and I'll start there. Did you know that 40% of all emissions, that they come from decisions we make in our kitchens at the kitchen table? That includes, what car do we drive? How do we heat our house or our apartment or condo? How do we heat the water where we live? How do we cook our food? How do we dry our clothes? Electrification, if we did it, if each of us did it, it would also create an opportunity for each of us to save on average $1,800 a year across the United States per household. So it not only would help the climate and the environment, it would save us substantial money per household. In fact, Rewiring America tells us that to achieve zero emissions, and that's where we need to be, because we can't heat up the atmosphere anymore, we need to install 1 billion new electric machines to replace our, quote, natural gas machines and coal machines. And we have to do that in the next 20 to 25 years. Well, that just sounds impossible because it means 50 million machines per year. But it is doable if we just stopped buying fossil fuel machines. And then, P.S., and I can tell you this from my own experience, you will get better performance from your electric machines and lower utility bills. I'm already seeing that because I got a heat pump this year, and I put in an electric induction stove, and I can see a measurable difference already. So I am saving money. I'm very excited about it. To feel kind of like you're doing the right thing and save money, that's a pretty powerful combination. You can electrify all these things in your home, and we'll go into each of them just briefly. Now, I created these slides about 2 weeks ago, and the last 2 columns had to do with federal and state as well, but mostly federal rebates and tax credits. Just last week, it was Wednesday or Thursday, the Trump administration put a pause on all disbursements from the IRA legislation. So we now know that we don't know for sure everything that will be blocked or paused or gotten rid of, but we know that these last 2 columns may disappear, except for the Illinois rebates. So we're in a very uncertain time. We don't know, but I can say to you, regardless of whether there are rebates and tax incentives, this is the time to do the replacements, because look at the first few columns. I'm just going to pick one thing. Heat pumps, which I just had put in. When I had a gas furnace, I was emitting 6.89 metric tons of greenhouse gases just from my house, just for that. And now I've cut that in half, and it would be even less if the electric grid here, if the ComEd grid were renewables instead of coal and some fossil fuels and nuclear. So I can see that I'm going to cut my emissions in half. The big things you can do are on this list, and you could make a big difference by making that decision. First, you could put in rooftop solar. If you have the right roof and you have the right tree situation, you can put in rooftop solar, and then you not only save money, but you can even get money back from Commonwealth Edison. How many of you have solar on your roofs? Just one person so far. Okay. Well, it certainly, there was a tax credit for it. I don't know if there will be. It's uncertain now. But it will save you enormous amounts of money. I have a friend who pays nothing on his electric bill. He gets money every month off of his electric bill. So you still have the same reliable access to the grid. It's kind of a no-brainer. And if you don't have the right roof, you can go with community solar like I had to do. And there you still get 20% savings from Commonwealth Edison. Signing up for community solar is very easy. Then, of course, you can electrify whatever vehicle you have. Hopefully, you will take this one really to heart, because 81% of all the vehicle miles traveled that are causing greenhouse gases come from our cars. 81%. And transportation is a huge contributor to global greenhouse gases. Also, the cost of electric cars is coming down. There are many of them now on parity with gas-powered cars. The charging infrastructure is better. And P.S., the maintenance costs are next to nothing. That's one of the reasons I think that car dealers don't tell you about electric cars, because they make their money on service. And there's just not a lot of service, because gas cars have about 2,000 moving parts and electric cars have about 200. And so the savings are substantial for electric cars. And then I did have the slide on tax credits and rebates. Illinois still has a rebate. It runs out immediately because so many people want to buy electric cars and would like the rebate. But I don't know what's going to happen now. You'll have to talk to your accountant or a tax attorney, keep your eye out for it. But it's worth doing with or without. My next purchase is going to be an electric car. I have a hybrid now, but I will not buy another gas-powered car. I've seen all my friends that have electric cars, they love them. They think it's the best decision they ever made. And then I've noticed that I just mentioned two of them, there are probably others. Two suburbs just near us have already created charger rebates for EV chargers. And I would love to see Oak Park and River Forest put in those kind of rebates for people that go to electric cars and put the chargers in their garages or in their community garages. The good news is that 17 of our states have already planned, and it's in the law, a fossil fuel vehicle purchase phase out. And that is 10 years from now. You won't be able to buy another gas car in these states. I want Illinois to move in the same direction. And that's one of the things that I'm working on at the state level. So what we want is more states to make that decision. Then there's the heat pump that I've already talked about. And what's great about them, a lot of people seem surprised when I tell them this, is that they both heat and cool your home. They replace the gas furnace and the air conditioner. And they are so much better. I cannot tell you. It's not just that I did a good thing. The heat is more even. It held up well in this cold snap. This is the first winter that I've had it. And the heat is constant and stable, and you like it a lot better. It's quieter. It's just better all around. So I would urge you to think about it when your gas furnace is no longer going to be working. Think hard about replacing it with an electric heat pump. And then a heat pump water heater. It's the same thing. They move a small amount of heat from the outside. They compress it to make it hot, and they move the heat inside your house, and that's what heats your water. And it's so much faster and more efficient. And then other appliances, of course, your clothes dryer, an induction stovetop. I got one of those. So much faster. You can boil an egg so much faster. And it's just, I don't know why I didn't do it years ago. I think I just didn't know to do it. But now that you know, I hope you will take action if you haven't. And then there's a few other good ideas I just want to mention. Trees, grasses, native plants, deep-rooted plants. These sequester carbon. And the more trees and natives you have in your yard, the better off the environment will be. They literally take in carbon and carbon dioxide, and that's used in photosynthesis. So they're a nature-based solution. And why not plant trees? You know, they cool us, they control flooding, they help with habitat for animals and insects and birds. They make the air cleaner, and they're beautiful. So the more of them we have, the better off we are. And I added donate, if you can. Donate to organizations that are planting them and nurturing them, like American Forests, like One Tree Planted, like Arbor Day. I give trees for everybody that I know at Christmas. That's my Christmas present to people. Trees. And I get them a little certificate, and it says 100 trees are being planted in your name. And that, to me, that's just one little thing I can do. Then, and this is sometimes hard to hear, eat less meat and more plant-based food. I'm not saying be a vegetarian, become a vegan, change your life. I'm just saying reduce your meat consumption, because that is a big contributor to the climate crisis. And then, we all know this, get out of your cars more frequently. Ride an electric bike, ride a traditional bike, walk, take the bus, take the train. Do as much as you can not to be adding greenhouse gases from your car. And even if you have an electric car, it's still better to do walking, biking, and public transit. And then I mentioned quickly organic waste. Plastic we all know about. You know why plastics are so bad. But organic waste, a lot of people don't realize that when you throw that banana peel in the trash and it goes to the landfill, you know what it creates? Methane. And methane is 80 times more powerful than carbon dioxide in warming the planet. 80 times more powerful. And that's what natural gas is. So when the gas companies like to call it natural gas, what they really should be saying is, do you want to buy a methane stove? Because that's what you've got. If you've got a gas stove, it's emitting methane all the time into your house and into your lungs. And a lot of the researchers are telling us that methane is terrible for lungs, for people with asthma. In fact, it causes asthma in young children. So let's not produce more methane. Let's take all that organic waste and compost it. At least in Oak Park, we have an opt-in composting program, but I want to make it an opt-out program. I want everybody in our village to have to compost, because we don't want the stuff going into landfills. It's adding to our global problem. So let's think about composting seriously. And then I guess I would just say, a lot of people, when I give my talks, have said to me, but what can I really do? I mean, I might not be here on the planet that much longer. I don't see, and Trump is in office, and how can I have an effect? Well, if you're just one person, you can not change the world, but you can have a ripple effect on the world. That's what I'm trying to do. We are each contributing to this crisis. I am, you are. We are wasting our money using fossil fuels. We're wasting our money. So what I do and what you do as an individual does influence the community. And when you buy a gas furnace instead of a heat pump, you're voting with your wallet. You're voting with your money to pollute the planet. Think about it. You know, you have a choice. You can make a change. I like Mother Teresa and Margaret Mead. I always have to mention them because you know what they say. I alone cannot change the world. But she says, I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples. And Margaret Mead says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. That's what I think we can be, a thoughtful, committed group of citizens. That's what I hope to become a part of. So that leads me to community action. And I want to talk to you very pragmatically about Oak Park itself. I don't have a part of this for River Forest, so if there are those of you from other communities, I'd be glad to get your data. But right now, I have Oak Park data. And we just got our latest greenhouse gas inventory data released a couple weeks ago. And so we know that we're kind of with the rest of the world here in the United States. Our biggest emitter is our houses, 38.8%. And our businesses and our public buildings, 32.9%. So it's our buildings. That's what we need to work on in our village. Transportation is high as well, but not as high as it is nationally. And so that's where we start in a way with that analysis. With all this in mind, a group of us created the Oak Park Climate Action Network. We created it in 2019. We didn't have a name. We just got together and said, we have to do something in our village. We've got to take some action. So we decided we needed advocacy, we needed education. Like today, we needed neighbor-to-neighbor assistance. And so we went about trying to do that. Now we have a website and a name, and so you can join that at any time. And so what we did, we first advocated for the creation of CROP, Climate Ready Oak Park. Passed in 2022, took us 2 years to get that to happen. Then we worked on the goals along with others. And the first three are the most, for me, the central ones. That is, achieve net zero emissions by 2050. 2050 is not very far off. It's 25 years away. But to get there, you have to get to 60% by 2030, and that is 5 years away. That is not very long. And a part of it is establishing 30% of the land in our village as green infrastructure or native plants, enhanced places for wildlife, trees, and plants, native plants. Those are things that we agreed to in CROP, and now we're advocating for it because you have to get the money to do this. The village has to advocate for this with a budget. It can't just be a bunch of words about what the village needs to do. It has to be money set aside. And so what we have been able to achieve is a year ago, a new ordinance went into effect that all new construction here in our village, it has to be electric. There are no gas hookups allowed in new construction, not in commercial or residential property. Well, a lot of people were developers and others, they were very unhappy about it. But we felt that we had to be the first to do it, and we were. The first municipality in Illinois, and first municipality in all of the Midwest. So I'm pretty proud of that. And we want other villages to do the same. We want the city of Chicago to do the same. We also established, and now this year in '25, we're getting the village to expand a way to retrofit existing homes in the village. So that, like my house, a 100-year-old house, I could have gotten some kind of assistance from the village if I was in the right income level. So that has started, and now this year they're allocating another $500,000 toward it, and we're trying to get them to do more. They also voted to increase the number of electric vehicle charging stations in the village and pay for it, and those are going to be put in. And we managed an ordinance to ban gas-powered leaf blowers. Oh, was I happy about that. Oh, I'm so glad to hear the applause because I thought that was horrible. And you know who it was also horrible for? The guys working with those gas-powered leaf blowers, because they're breathing in all that methane. And so it's not just bad for everyone, it's bad for the workers. And then I'll just mention last the creation of a one-stop shop that helps residents with electrification. That is now on the budget for this year, for '25. And the village is in the middle of planning for that one-stop shop. So in the meantime, what we did, the Oak Park Climate Action Network, we created a climate coach program in March, 10 months ago. And we just are a bunch of volunteers, and we help people informally. We don't get any money for it. We don't get money by who we recommend. And we just, people call us. They go to the website and they call up one of the coaches and they say, I think I want to put in a heat pump, but I don't know where to start. Who should I work with? Or any of these issues that you see bulleted here. And we help them. We get them started. We are not full-time paid contractors. We don't pretend to be professionals, but we will say, here's my experience, here's what happened to me, and here's who I used, and this is what I think of them, and blah, blah, blah. And the people trust this neighbor-to-neighbor help. We also respect their confidentiality. So I think people appreciate it, and I'm excited because the number of people asking for climate coaches is growing each month since we started it 10 months ago. Just this month we had, like 8 or 10 people, whereas in the beginning we had 2 or 3. Now we're getting 3 times that number calling us. They come on an email on the website, it goes to all of us, gets assigned to somebody, and then we call them and we help them. And it's really been fun, actually. I've enjoyed it. So I'm suggesting that you might want to join Oak Park Climate Action Network because there's no cost. It's just an advocacy group. And if you've had electrification work done, maybe you could become a climate coach as well. We just meet once a month. You'll see here when it is, last Wednesday on Zoom. We meet twice a year in person because we're right here in the village, so we have no excuse not to get together. And then I would also recommend that you consider joining the Climate Reality Project. Again, no cost. The Chicago Metro chapter is working on all the same issues I just talked about. Al Gore founded it in 2006, and now there's 80 chapters across the United States. There are chapters all over the world. He's trained like 80,000 people in this period of time. And so we would love to have new people to work on these teams that work on trees, regenerative agriculture, native plants, electrifying transportation, solar energy, all the issues. And we'd love to have you as a part of the Oak Park of the Chicago Climate Reality chapter here, Metro Chicago. So I would ask you, consider it. Think about joining us. We took a pledge, 50 of us so far. I just like to put the pledge out there. And it says, as my home appliances and vehicles reach the end of their useful life, I pledge to be ready to replace them with electric alternatives. Now, that is a very important statement. We are not saying, go out tomorrow and replace everything with electric, because nobody can afford that. So instead, we're saying, when that gas furnace is getting older, don't wait until it's gone bad and then go, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to get another gas furnace. Plan for electrification ahead of time. Set aside the money for it, just like you would when you want to buy a new car. So that is an important pledge. I took that pledge. That's what got me to do the heat pump last year. And I don't know if I would have done it if I hadn't taken the pledge, because then I felt like, well, I'm the campaign chair. I better do it. Otherwise, what are people going to say? I've got to contribute to this, So then invite us to talk at your organization or church or synagogue or school. Let's get the word out to as many audiences as we can. Please, we will present to all groups, honorarium or no honorarium, just let us know. And then I'm going to say very briefly, policy decisions at the state level. The federal level, as I said, isn't looking very good right now, but at the state level, we have a very progressive governor and legislature. And remember, this is the time of the General Assembly in Illinois. It meets January to the end of May. Wow, there are just an enormous number of bills in place, environmental bills that need to be supported, like a climate super fund that fossil fuel companies would have to pay into for the damages they've caused our state. Well, why don't we help pass that? There are many other pieces of legislation, and I lead the legislative advocacy team. So if you are interested in helping us with the General Assembly of Illinois, there is my email, and I will have it again at the end. Please contact me. We need more people to help us advocate with legislators, and there are lots of roles you can play. So think about that as something that you can do. I have to make my final point about getting rid of subsidies for fossil fuels. We spend trillions of dollars subsidizing the industry that is killing us. Trillions. So if we follow the money, if we disinvest in them, if we force them into climate superfund payments, if we sue them like we got the city of Chicago to do, we want them to pay. The damages are enormous. They've known for 50 years that their products were killing people, and they continued to produce them and obfuscate and not tell the truth. So it's time to hold them accountable. And I want to show you the last couple things here. I want to show you what would happen if all subsidies for fossil fuels were taken away. First, we would save 1.6 million lives, and we could go into all the details of what makes that up. We would have an increase in government revenues by $4.4 trillion, and we would help emissions fall 34% below 2019 levels, and we could do that in 5 years. And the incomes would be better distributed. The subsidies go to rich companies and rich people. And what about the rest of us? What about the poor people in the third world? So I know that we're not likely to get rid of fossil fuel subsidies in this next 4 years, but it's only 4 years. We have time. We can work on it. We can plan for it. And believe me, that is where I will be spending my time. Now, one last hopeful note from Michael Mann, who is a distinguished professor at Penn State. Mann said in his book, once the world reaches net zero, global temperatures will stop increasing in as soon as 3 to 5 years. That doesn't mean we'll eliminate what's already there, but they'll stop increasing. And right now, you saw that red line, they are increasing exponentially. So if we want to stop that, we got to get to net zero emissions. We are a long way from there. Final quote by Robert Kennedy, the one that I worked for in the 60s, 70s. Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. And in the total of all those acts will be written the history of this generation. I want us to be a part of rewriting the history of this generation. I want us to be the ones that make that difference for the future, because this is what I want to save. This is a picture of the Earth taken from the Apollo mission in 1972, the first time anybody saw the Earth from space. It's so beautiful. Let's try to save the rest of what we can. So let's work together to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam. Not only your passion, we can all feel your passion, and also all the things you've done and given us so many ideas that we can do. So thank you so much. And now time for questions.
Yeah, comments, questions, yes.
I have two questions, both centered about the accessibility to reliable information on two things. First of all, how would one find out just what the current costs are for replacing a gas furnace with electricity? And I'm not asking you whether you have that right now, but really, what is the pathway to getting concrete information about these things? Secondly, where would one find out exactly what the subsidies are constituting that $1 trillion in subsidy for fossil fuels? I'm not aware exactly how I'm paying that. Apparently, my taxes are going somewhere to do that, but I have no idea what it is or who I would talk to change it. I'm really talking about accessibility to that information.
Yeah, those are great questions. On the first one, there are several places that you can get this information on the cost of transition to electric heat pumps and other electrical appliances. One is the OPCAN website, opcan.org website, has a lot of the costs listed for that average of what people have paid. And more important, the climate coaches, we can help you with that, because it depends on your house and how it's heated now. The costs can range. If you have radiator heat, if you have forced air heat, each of those conditions we need to know and look at, and then be able to tell you what the likely cost would be. And there are a lot of people in Oak Park who are doing this and could share their costs with you. And then there are contractors on our website that have helped people make the transition, and they too can share the range of cost to make the transition. And they're very good. I mean, I've worked with a couple of them. I've referred them to at least 15 people already, and I trust them. I think their prices are reasonable. So that's the first question. The website, the climate coaches that you can get on the website, you just spend 30 minutes with somebody on the phone and ask them, and they can begin to tell you the range of costs that they've seen from themselves and others. On the subsidies question, this is very interesting. The subsidies are hidden in a lot of areas. You have to go in, literally, you have to go into multiple parts of the government to find out where all the subsidies are. And what the group did, where I got the data from, is they did that. They went into all the different places where the subsidies exist, and they created a database. And the place I would go is my legislator. I think that our congressmen and our senators are sympathetic to the idea of reducing subsidies, but they are not in the majority. So it's not likely that we would get that in the next 2 years, but we have to plan for the future. And by seeding that information with our legislators, continuing to put that out there, I think we can gradually make that change. But I think there's no, that's the sneaky part of it all. There's no one place to find it. But it's kind of buried in a lot of different little spots.
I wanted to make a comment. This is Becky Grajeda. I'm going to be sending out an e-blast with all of the links that Pam Tate mentioned in her presentation, as well as other resources that I know and will look into regarding this. So this will be if you're on our email list, you'll get that information.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great. There was another question, yeah. Or comment.
I was just in Europe in October. I was in a medieval city in Belgium. Some of the buildings are from the 1400s, but they were so far forward of where we are. I mean, they wouldn't think about plastic bags. There were like 5 different kinds of public transportation. There was rail, there was subway, there were trams, there were buses, and they actually closed off the entire core of the city of Ghent. And I was visiting my host sisters from when I was an exchange student many years ago. They will not come visit in the US because of the carbon cost. I mean, and I was just amazed talking to them how much more aware of it than we tend to be here in the Midwest. What made the difference, do you know?
You know, I think I have asked that same question of I've asked that same question to people. And I get lots of different answers, but one of the things that seems to be said over and over again is they have a very different notion of the social contract than we do. The idea is that a lot of Europeans feel that they have an obligation to their society and their community. And we have been a much more individualistic country. I go and do what's good for me and my immediate family, but I don't necessarily have the same sense of responsibility to the whole of society. And that, I think that assumption has worsened in the United States. I think we're in a much less friendly environment to community good, public good. Even the support of universities is trended in the same direction. It used to be that we had a lot of public support because if you got an education, you could serve your country. Now, the argument for getting a degree is you can make more money for yourself. So I think we've moved away from the notion of social obligation. And I think then that translates into making laws that don't help us in the public good, but help promote the private good. I think that's a piece of it. I don't think it's the whole answer, but it's very troubling when you look at, like Norway, I think they've now are at a point where 75% of the cars on the highways are electric now. And they made a plan to do it. And they've got, and they're working toward meeting the Paris goals instead of getting out of the Paris Agreement. So I think we're right now headed in the absolute wrong direction when we compare ourselves to our European neighbors. I wish I had the whole answer, but it's extremely troubling.
Can you explain how heat pumps work technically? How does it differ from a boiler or from gas forced air?
I know that the reason it works for both heating and cooling is that it's essentially taking the air from the outside and heating it without a heat force like boiling. It literally somehow transfers the heat inside, but in the summer it takes the heat outside and reverses it and turns it into cool air. I know, but I can't tell you I'm just, you can see, right? I'm not very good at this. So, but I'll tell you one thing, I know it works.
You had your chart on there, which is basically, I think, called the hockey stick curve, where you have showed that since 1980, the warming trend on the Earth has increased exponentially. And I'm curious to know what is causing this, considering that, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the middle of the 18th century, where you had, total reliance on fossil fuels, inefficient kinds of technology. If you look at Chicago, I can remember you go in there and you had all this black smoke belching out of apartment buildings. You had steam locomotives, which I volunteer at the Illinois Railway Museum, and believe me, there is nothing as dirty as a steam locomotive. I'm wondering why, when we have now so much more efficiency in our machines, why this is continuing to rise, this curve.
What I have come to understand from everything I've read is that even though the machines are more efficient, the cumulative effect of all of the emissions, the growth in population, the use of these machines by so many more people in so many more industries has far outstripped the efficiency. And so over time, the accumulated carbon in the atmosphere, it doesn't go away. It stays there for thousands of years. So as you add more and more of it, it's going to exponentially rise regardless of how efficient you get. I mean, and think about population growth as a factor. When I was born, there were 2.5 billion people on the planet. There are now 8.5 billion. So in my lifetime, this has happened. So you take the combination of more people, more machines, more pollution, even with efficiency, and what you get is a cumulative effect that is where things are out of control. I think that's the explanation. And the progress we're making with wind and solar, we're making tremendous progress, but it isn't outstripping the cumulative effect of fossil fuel emissions. We just aren't making the progress fast enough. We have to stop the emissions altogether.
I was wondering if you also work with other villages in our area.
We do. I mean, we would, and we do. You know, I mean, we haven't taken on working with village government in other villages, but the Climate Reality Project, where I am also a leader, they do have a suburban climate action group that is trying to work with municipalities throughout the metro region. And in many cases, they are taking the work we're doing in Oak Park as an example of what can be done in other villages. So we are all very interested in expanding our work to other villages.